The FBI have their work cut out for them. I'm your host Yusuf, and these are the top 10 scariest criminals in the United States the FBI fears the most. Make sure to subscribe and ring that bell to get notified whenever we upload a new video. Anyways, let's get a hold of a detective.
Enter Benoit Blanc.
Number 10, Al Capone. Alphonse Gabriel Capone, sometimes known by the nickname Scarface, was an American gangster and businessman who attained notoriety during the Prohibition era as the co-founder and boss of the Chicago outfit. His 7-year reign as a crime boss ended when he went to prison at the age of 33. Capone was born in New York City in 1899 to Italian immigrants. He joined the Five Points gang as a teenager and became a bouncer in organized crime premises such as brothels. In his early 20s, he moved to Chicago and became a bodyguard and trusted factotum for Johnny Torrio, head of a criminal syndicate that illegally supplied drinks, the forerunner of the outfit, and was politically protected through the Unione Siciliana. A conflict with the North Side gang was instrumental in Capone's rise and fall. Torrio went into retirement after Northside gunmen almost ended him, handing control to Capone. Capone expanded the bootlegging business through increasingly violent means, but his mutually profitable relationship with Mayor William Hale Thompson and the city's police meant he seemed safe from law enforcement. If Scarface had the city's mayor in his pocket, then the FBI really had to crack down on him. Number 9, Charles Manson. Charles Mills Manson was an American criminal and musician who led the Manson family, a cult based in California in the late 1960s. Some of the members committed a series of 9 executions at 4 locations in July and August 1969. In 1971, Manson was convicted of first-degree slaughter and conspiracy to commit execution for the removals of 7 people, including the film actress Sharon Tate. The prosecution contended that while Manson never directly ordered the executions, his ideology constituted an overt act of conspiracy. Before the slaughters, Manson had spent more than half of his life in correctional institutions. While gathering his cult following, Manson was a singer-songwriter on the fringe of the Los Angeles music industry, chiefly through a chance association with Dennis Wilson of the Beach Boys, who introduced Manson to record producer Terry Melcher. In 1968, the Beach Boys recorded Manson's song Cease to Exist, renamed Never Learn Not to Love, as a single B-side, but without a credit to Manson. Afterward, Manson attempted to secure a record contract through Melcher, but was unsuccessful. The FBI were probably afraid to be brainwashed by him like his cult members. Number 8, Ted Kaczynski. Here's what it says on the official FBI website on who Kaczynski was. How do you catch a twisted genius who aspires to be the perfect anonymous butcher, who builds untraceable explosives and delivers them to random targets, who leaves false clues to throw off authorities, who lives like a recluse in the mountains of Montana and tells no one of his secret crimes? That was the challenge facing the FBI and its investigative partners, who spent nearly 2 decades hunting down this ultimate lone wolf bomber. The man that the world would eventually know as Theodore Kaczynski came to our attention in 1978, with the explosion of his first primitive homemade bomb at a Chicago university. Over the next 17 years, he mailed or hand-delivered a series of increasingly sophisticated bombs that ended 3 Americans and injured nearly 24 more. Along the way, he sowed fear and panic, even threatening to blow up airliners in flight. In 1979, an FBI-led task force that included the ATF and US Postal Inspection Service was formed to investigate the Unabomb case, codenamed for the university and airline bombing targets involved. The task force would grow to more than 150 full-time investigators, analysts, and others. In search of clues, the team made every possible forensic examination of recovered bomb components and studied the lives of victims in minute detail. These efforts proved of little use in identifying the bomber, who took pains to leave no forensic evidence, building his bombs essentially from scrap materials available almost anywhere. And the victims, investigators later learned, were chosen randomly from library search. This guy was hard to catch. Number 7, Tom Horn. While working again near Iron Mountain, Wyoming on July 15, 1901, Horn visited the Jim and Dora Miller family, who were cattle ranchers. Jim Miller and his neighbor, Kells Nickel, had already had several disputes following Nickel's introduction of sheep into the Iron Mountain area. Miller frequently accused Nickel of letting his sheep graze on Miller's land. At the Millers, Horn met Gwendolyn M. Kimmel, the young teacher at the Iron Mountain School. Miss Kimmel was supported by both the large Miller and Kells Nickel families, and she boarded with the Millers. Horn entertained her with accounts of his adventures. That day, some males of the Miller family and he went fishing. Victor Miller, a son about his age, and he also practiced shooting, both of them with .30-30s. The Miller and Nickel families were the only ones to have children at the school. Before she arrived, Kimmel had been advised of the family's ongoing feud and found that it was often played out by conflict among the children. A few days later, on July 18th, Willie Nickel, the son of sheep ranchers Kells and Mary Nickel, was found slaughtered near their homestead gate. A coroner's inquest began to investigate the slaughter. More violent incidents occurred during the period of the coroner's inquest, which was expanded to investigate these incidents and lasted from July through September 1901. On August 4th, Kells Nickel was shot and wounded. Some 60 to 80 of his sheep were found shot or clubbed. Deputy Marshal Joe LaForce later questioned Horn in January 1902 about the execution, while supposedly talking to him about employment. Horn was still inebriated from the night before, but LaForce gained what he called a confession to the slaughter of Willie Nickel. Horn allegedly confessed to ending the young Willie with his rifle from 300 yards, or 270 meters, which he boasted of as the best shot that he ever made and the dirtiest trick that he had ever done. Number 6. Richard Lee Mcnair. McNair was sent to prison for a robbery gone wrong, ending in the execution of a man and another man being shot 4 times. He has escaped multiple times from several prisons, but managed to dissuade police from sending him to a maximum security prison because it would be too far from his parents for them to visit. He then acquired a job at the prison fixing mailbags. After several months, McNair designed a way to leave the prison by hiding in a pallet of mailbags he'd fixed, and that was shrink wrapped. He waited for a forklift to deliver him to a truck, which drove him an hour and 15 minutes away from the prison, where he cut himself out and began jogging off. Hours after his escape from Pollock, McNair was stopped by police officer Carl Bordelon. McNair had no identification and proceeded to give Officer Bordelon the alias of Robert Jones. When asked again 5 minutes later, he gave a different alias, Jimmy Jones, though the officer did not notice the different answer. Sloppy mistake. McNair laughed and joked with the officer, and even as the officer got a matching description of the inmate, McNair appeared collected and calm. He successfully convinced Bordelon that he was jogging and in town to help on a post-Katrina roofing project, allowing him to go back to jogging within 10 minutes. Number 5. Ted Bundy. Theodore Robert Bundy was a serial butcher who kidnapped and ended numerous young women and girls during the 1970s and possibly earlier. After more than a decade of denials, he confessed to 30 executions committed in 7 states between 1974 and 1978. His true victim total is unknown and likely significantly higher. Bundy was regarded as charismatic and handsome, and exploited this to win the trust of both his victims and society as a whole. He would typically approach his victims in public places, either feigning a physical impairment, such as an injury, or impersonating an authority figure, before bludgeoning them into unconsciousness and taking them to secondary locations to be strangled. He decapitated at least 12 victims and kept their severed heads as mementos in his apartment. On a few occasions, he broke into homes at night and bludgeoned his victims as they slept. In 1975, Bundy was arrested and jailed in Utah for aggravated kidnapping and attempted criminal assault. He then became a suspect in a progressively longer list of unsolved removals in several states. Facing execution charges in Colorado, Bundy engineered 2 dramatic escapes and committed further assaults in Florida, including 3 terminations, before its ultimate recapture in 1978. Number 4. Alfred George Hinds. Hinds was an amazing escape artist. He escaped from Nottingham prison after sneaking through the locked doors and over a 20-foot prison wall, for which he became known in the press as Houdini Hinds. He worked as a builder-decorator in Ireland and throughout Europe until his arrest by detectives of Scotland Yard. Basically, like European FBI, in 1956 after 248 days as a fugitive. After his arrest, Hinds brought a lawsuit against authorities charging the prison commissioners with illegal arrest and used the incident as a means to plan his next escape by having a padlock smuggled into him while he was at the law courts. 2 guards escorted him to the toilet, but when they removed his handcuffs, Hinds bundled the men into the cubicle and snapped the padlock onto screw eyes that his accomplices had earlier fixed to the door. He escaped into the crowd on Fleet Street, but was captured at an airport 5 hours later. Hinds would make his 3rd escape from Chelmsford prison less than a year later. He then returned to Ireland, where he lived for 2 years as a used car dealer under the name William Herbert Bishop, before his arrest after being stopped in an unregistered car. Number 3. Frank Lee Moris. Frank Morris was born in Washington, D.C. His parents abandoned him when he was just 11, so he spent the rest of his childhood in foster homes as an orphan. He was convicted of his first criminal offense at 13, and by his late teens had been arrested for crimes ranging from narcotics possession to armed robbery. He spent most of his early years in jail serving lunch to prisoners. Later, he was arrested for grand larceny in Miami Beach, car theft, and armed robbery. Morris reportedly ranked in the top 2% of the general population in intelligence, as measured by IQ testing, where he landed a 133. He served time in Florida and Georgia, then escaped from the Louisiana State Penitentiary while serving 10 years for bank robbery. He was recaptured a year later while committing a burglary and sent to Alcatraz on January 20th, 1960, as inmate number AZ-1441. He was a part of the infamous 5-person crew who managed to escape Alcatraz. The crew used a raft made of raincoats and fake heads they'd sculpted during their time there to trick the guards. Number 2. Jim Jones. James Warren Jones was an American preacher, political activist, and mass slaughterer. He led the People's Temple, a new religious movement between 1955 and 1978. In what he called revolutionary self-life-taking, Jones and the members of his inner circle orchestrated a mass slaughter self-execution in his remote jungle commune at Jonestown, Guyana on November 18, 1978. Jones and the events which occurred at Jonestown have had a defining influence on society's perception of cults. Jones founded the organization that would become the People's Temple in Indianapolis in 1955. In 1956, Jones began to be influenced by Father Divine and the Peace Mission movement. Jones distinguished himself through civil rights activism, founding the temple as a fully integrated congregation and promoting socialism. In 1964, Jones joined and was ordained a minister by the Disciples of Christ. His attraction to the disciples was largely due to the autonomy and tolerance they granted to differing views within their denomination. Number 1. Sirhan Bashara Sirhan. Around 12:15 a.m. on June 5, 1968, Sirhan fired at United States Senator Robert F. Kennedy and the crowd surrounding him in the Ambassador Hotel in Los Angeles, shortly after Kennedy had finished addressing supporters in the hotel's main ballroom. Authors George Plimpton, Jimmy Breslin, Pete Hamill, former professional football player Rosie Greer, and 1960 Olympic gold medalist Rafer Johnson were among several men who subdued and disarmed Sirhan after a struggle. Kennedy was shot 3 times, once in the head and twice in the back, with a 4th bullet passing through his jacket. He passed away almost 26 hours later at Good Samaritan Hospital. 5 other people at the event were also shot, all of whom recovered. Paul Schrade, an official with the United Automobile Workers Union, William Weasel, an ABC TV unit manager, Ira Goldstein, a reporter with the Continental News Service, Elizabeth Evans, a friend of Pierre Salinger, one of Kennedy's campaign aides, and Erwin Stroll, a teenage Kennedy volunteer. During his trial, he asked for his legal team to withdraw and confessed to the crimes multiple times and asked to be executed. Due to this odd behavior, the judge denied all of these requests. Later, he was sentenced to deceasement, but was commuted to a life sentence in 1971. Sirhan requested parole on multiple occasions and was denied a total of 15 times. Thanks for watching. Leave a like and comment if you enjoyed this video, and we'll see you next time. On Crime Time.